The fashion, the work and costume in Blade Runner was shockingly different.
I received the script and it read to me kind of like a detective story, almost like a film noir. Just kind of had that feeling and that grittiness. And so I was looking forward to that.
I had a marvelous costume designer, Charlie Node, and Michael's excellent, but Charlie Node was fundamentally the designer. And not enough acknowledgement is given to what Charles did.
Ridley asked if I would, mind working with someone else, and it was kind of a great treat because, we costume designers always work alone. We don't work in this country with partners. We're kind of just working in a vacuum until we were told by Ridley that the first location had been set, and that was Union Station. We found this beautiful mosaic tile work with geometric patterns on them. It was Mexican deco, and it was something that we then, pattern-wise, incorporated into all the designs of the film. Because Charles and I saw the film as a film noir, we were looking back to the detective stories of the 1940s. Charles wanted Harrison to be a gumshoe. He wanted him to be a private detective. And so what it was just kind of redefining what a futuristic trench coat would look like and what his one suit would look like, the suit he always wears and kind of lives in and is kind of creased. I did make 2 or 3 shirts for him, and he did have a couple ties, but it was always the same coat, and I believe always the same suit.
We gave him a reddish, almost Harris tweed, herringbone jacket with little lapels. I've still got his tie, which is a cross-printed, hand-printed tie. So it's like we hadn't gone too far. The trick with costume design like that is don't go too far.
I remember early on when Harrison was first cast, he didn't have very much to say. The only comment he had, the only request he had, was that he not wear a hat.
He said, I just did that. He saw the hat, this is it. And I went, oh, shit. And so we didn't do that.
He said, I just came off a long movie and I wore a hat through the entire thing, and if I don't, wear another hat for quite a while, it'll be fine with me.
The character, the haircut was it was a preemptive move on my part, and that is to say, I had my hair cut. And Ridley said, whoa, wait a second. I said, well, you want to wait a second, wait a couple weeks, then it'll grow out, but can't do anything now. I liked the haircut. I thought it was just enough of a break from what people were doing contemporarily. So it had an odd look to it.
She looked absolutely great, really special.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful woman. And the makeup just was who she was, really. The most perfect lips that I'd ever made up. And her hair was gorgeous, and Shirley, our hairstylist, did a wonderful job, gorgeous job on the hair.
Ridley's persistence with how the hair was, I actually wore my hair a little bit like the Blade Runner look, because we went over and over in makeup and hair just to get the hair up and in front of the face, and how we ended up doing that was very much a trial and error.
Well, one of my favorite designers was a designer named Adrian. He was doing something called, I think he called it insertion, and what it was instead of using one piece of fabric to make a coat, for example, or a suit, he would take the fabric, or many fabrics, and turn them different ways so that the grain was going different ways, or the pattern was going different ways, and also take different similar fabrics and put them together. When you see Rachel's clothes, there's either quilting or, patterns made in that way. She had 2 or 3 suits and 2 or 3 coats. Of course, things that went underneath, like blouses. There's a scene at the piano where she's wearing a beautiful silk blouse that our seamstress Sakura sewed for hours and hours and hours, made out of different colors of Chinese silk.
We scrapped an idea, Ridley did, where they put a piece of tape around my legs and they greased up my legs.
You know, Ridley was saying, what kind of, futuristic hose could we do for her? We came up with something that I thought would look great, and that was to tie a silk ribbon around the top of her thigh where the hose would end. And that would make the leg kind of indent. And below the ribbon, just oil her leg. And so it did look like some newfangled, strange, futuristic, idea of hosiery.
In terms of how it looked, it just wasn't practical. And then it got all over the costumes, and then it didn't work, and they're trying to grab my legs, and the whole grabbing leg thing and pulling my skirt up and getting it all over the costumes, people just complained, and it just didn't work, so we scrapped it. So they cleaned my legs up, and then we did something else.
I don't know if it really, was that visible in the film, but I knew we'd see her legs and wanted to do something, so that, thought went into everything.
Mr. Deckard, Dr. Eldon Tyrrell.
Tyrrell was one of the richest industrialists in the land, and what the costume ended up being was almost a white cocoon of a dressing gown that was made in white silk and stuffed with down and totally quilted, almost like he was still in bed when he wasn't.
The bathrobe, I looked at the bathrobe I was wearing, the stitching, the fine stitching. This was done artistically. The glasses, I had to go to a special glass place to get the glasses that he wanted. I mean, detail after detail. Where the hell did he come up with this? This is all in Ridley's mind. He's a very sick man.
What's this?
Nexus 6, Roy Batty.
He was kind of a very, strong, heroic anti-hero, and or even a hero of sorts by the end of the film. I think the Marlon Brando motorcycle jacket, perhaps, just something iconic. Black leather with the high collar, I think, was an iconic look that just seemed right for him.
I think Charlie was the first one to invent skin-tight leotards. And Charles said, I thought these stretch leotards, I'm going, stretch leotards? Now, today, these are like cycling trousers or, sports gear, actually, to hold you together and also make you look a little bit better.
We fooled around a little bit with some ideas. I remember that we tried a skunky punky kind of look, but the bigger deal was that they had all these designs of different tattoos. And it was interesting because he wanted to have like a map on my body when I subtly have undressed myself. And I think it only shows in one photograph. That's the irony of it. But nice detail, though,
That's Leon, ammunition loader on intergalactic runs. He can lift 400-pound atomic loads all day and night. The only way you can hurt him is to kill him.
These replicants were designed to be, different strata of life. And so he was kind of your everyman, I think. He didn't have the needs that, a lot of the other characters in the film had. I remember I went to the dentist, and I'm wearing this paper bib backed in plastic that was had this funny hospital green color to it, and I thought this would be a great costume for Leon to be interrogated in. So we got the fabric and made him some hospital clothes out of that.
I just do eyes. Just eyes. Genetic design. Just eyes.
Chu was wearing something that he could go into a sub-zero freezer and work. It was something futuristic that looked like he had had it for a really long time. I mean, it was kind of all distressed and had rubber tubes going into it and patches of leather, and it was this whole coat with a heating system.
I remember going in for wardrobe fitting. They put this heavy cloak around me that was stiff as heck. I says, oh gosh, does he know what he's doing? But on the second and third, and then finally when the film, was made, it was astronomical. It was one of the best costumes I ever had. It just had that imagination of Ridley Scott.
Eddie was doing a show in town at that moment, I think, called Zoot Suit. But Eddie's hat and Zoot Suit was like this. And I thought we'd go the way we'd go fedora with a narrow brim. Could almost be dressed as if he was a well-to-do drug dealer. And in fact was the man who did all the dirty work for the department. The word gaff is a good name, actually.
He was a bit of a dandy. I think jewelry and piercings and a little bit over the top fabric-wise, pattern-wise. Pattern on pattern with a tie, and I found this amazing coat, and I remember thinking that that would be like the crowning glory. And we, cut it apart and put it back together, upside down and backward, and that was his coat.
It was not futuristic. It was very practical. The coat was practical. The cane was practical. The hats, because it was always raining, and we knew it would be acid rain, and it was tough, and there was be a lot of stuff going on.
In a way, we were also kind of wanting to prove that it wasn't a 1940s movie, so it was different, and we didn't want everybody to be kind of in this exact same vein. So he was an individual who kind of veered off in another direction.
This is Zora. She's trained for an off-world kick murder squad. Talk about Beauty and the Beast. She's both.
I think it was Charles' idea for her to be just wearing jewels and glitter for her, snake charming act. There was a woman who came to my attention, and she made wearable art, and we had her crochet, the bikini costume.
They wanted to have these snake scales, or a semblance thereof, and what we ended up doing was doing 3 sizes of sequins. And it took 3 hours to glue them on in a given pattern that I designed. Did her body makeup and then glued those on.
It was a very pleasant experience. I mean, it just took hours and hours. There was a layer of makeup, and then there were 3 people working on me and gluing the different sequins on and the little pieces. But I would just go to sleep. It was wonderful.
The final scene in the dressing room is Ridley wanted her to go into the shower and those scales wash off. Okay, well, I'm having a hard time keeping those suckers on. So what do you do? I said it's a one-shot deal. And I used hairstyling gel to create my glue, so to speak, so that when she goes into the shower and the water hits her, they washed off.
We wanted her to be in some kind of a bra. We kind of liked the idea of her wearing something that hadn't been seen before. And so it was soft metal, it was wired, and it just kind of formed her body, and then she could just pull it off. The clear plastic raincoat is, to so many people who talk to me, like their favorite garment in the movie. And it came about as something practical to protect her from, the broken glass. It was something that stood out, the way it was lit and the fact that it was, clear plastic. So it worked on so many levels. I think it was a great choice.
The foreskin job is Pris, a basic pleasure model, the standard item for military clubs in the outer colonies.
Ridley wanted her hair all chopped up like, a punk rocker, which was kind of happening right then. She has very fine corn silk hair, and she said her hair grows extremely slowly. And she begged us not to cut her hair. She said she would do anything. I think that might be why she brought her own wig in, just to be armed with something.
It was just, one of those really fortunate situations where we had one of the most brilliant designers, Charles Node, and we kind of just clicked and saw her in a similar way, and then he just went off and took off, and then he was using these curtain fabrics. That was the fabric that was in between the strips of sort of fake leopard skin or some kind of animal, tiger stripe or something. And you know, it gives you absolutely no weather protection or warmth or anything, but it looks fantastic.
All along, I was kind of thinking of things that I hadn't seen before, and we did make this spandex costume for her, and instead of her wearing a bra or having darts put into the costume, we heat molded the breasts into it. The other thing I had in my mind when we were prepping the film was I just thought it'd be really cool if she was airbrushing her eye makeup on. I talked to Ridley about that, and he loved the idea, and so, you know, it is in the film.
What's your name? Mine's J.F. Sebastian.
Sebastian was like Puck, and he was a craftsman, and he was like a tinker and a toy maker, and he had a little apron or vest with lots of little pockets and a little quilted jacket, and he just looked kind of almost storybook, like slightly elfin.
There were always a little bit of creative things that we were dealing with. There's a lot of things like all of a sudden come up with a half a dozen toys that were little people. Pick up a nose here and this and that and make his toys for him.
There were some actual toys, and then there were some actual little people that we dressed up and made up to look like toys, to look like toy soldiers, you know, put gloves on them.
Home again, jiggity jig.
Their movements were amazing, and I think really added a lot to the film. At the time, it seemed like what Tokyo at rush hour would be like. Just masses and masses of people, you know, like filling the streets, and continual rain, lots of umbrellas, lots of different types of people all crossing and passing in the darkness. Ridley wanted the world to be a really dangerous, dark place. You know, he didn't want the police to look like your friendly cop on the beat. So what we did was we created like body armor. They were very fascist looking, and yet they had to look authentic and official, and so we created patches and a ranking system for the arms, and, you know, like a normal officer would have. But they're very, you know, they're all designed for protectiveness, you know, like body armor.
I had a crew of like 40 makeup and hair to help me out because we had those huge scenes with all this background people, and really decided he wanted the Asians to have a little different look. And so I created a blue foundation, a light blue foundation that was Asian blue. I still have a jar of it someplace over in my bag somewhere.
We were working with extras casting and getting people with the most interesting faces, and Ridley wanted a lot of Asian people. You know, it was a situation where there was acid rain, so people had umbrellas and they had large hats. We thought there would be, you know, a lot of Asian immigrants, and so we kind of fell back on the look of a coolie hat. We actually just went to different farmers markets and Pier 1 and just got lots of baskets and wrapped people's heads and made hats out of the baskets. The poor people were you know, almost like homeless people wearing rags that were distressed and overdyed. And so, you know, there were hundreds and hundreds of those costumes. Also, Ridley, I think one of the things he might have talked about at that time was having umbrellas where the shaft would light up, because everybody would be kind of almost living under their umbrella because of the constant acid rain. It just gave them a way of shedding light on the world. Early on, when Charles and I were doing sketches, we incorporated hairstyles. And we thought if the clothes were 1940s, or using that as a takeoff point, maybe the hair would be as well. And yet we did these very strange kind of pompadours, or just little knots in the front of the hair on the fashionable female extras.
In fashion, you call it fashion forward. It was a combination of the future and retro. And that's the way a lot of fashion is done. And that's one of the reasons I thought, gee, this would be great for the fashion magazines.
Fashion designers watch film a lot. They're very influenced by certain kinds of movie. I think Charlie's was an influence on fashion, definitely.
Just being a part of it, you know, I was happy to be there every day. I was excited and you know, couldn't do enough. When it ended, I was a bit bereft. It was the most creative thing that I had ever done.